At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
It is a new day for 911 professionals. They have gone from the most important person you will never see to the most vital piece of public safety. Truth be told, they always have been. The curtain has been pulled back, and they are sharing their stories. Welcome to Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday, by Ricardo Martinez II, and narrated by myself, Ricardo Martinez II, and distributed by Beacon Audio Books. Copyright 2023. That's right, everyone. Finally, I can let everyone know the rumors are true. Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday is now available as an audiobook on Audible, and it's a long time coming. Very excited. Not a lot of authors get the opportunity to voice their own book, but I had the honor and privilege to do so. So thank you to Beacon Audio Books, as well as my publisher, Titled Town Publishing, for everything, but especially all of you for making the I Am 911 movement, as well as Imagine Listening, what it is today. I appreciate you all more than you know. So go ahead, head out, stream it, download it, however you consume your audiobooks. Imagine Listening is now available. Imagine listening. That's something I ask you to do on a regular basis. Not just hear, but listen, understand, appreciate. Now imagine that I'm the one listening, but I can't understand. No matter how hard you try, how much you raise your volume, or use different words, I just won't get the message. That's what it's like for non-English speaking callers when they reach 911 in the United States. But it doesn't have to be. Translate audio and text instantly using Prepared Assist and let your caller be understood. Visit prepared911.com/translation to see how you can make language barriers crumble. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you're on Patreon, Circle, or Facebook. Thank you so very much. For those who are listening on audio right now, you can't see this, but for those of you who are watching this or going to be watching this, I have to watch out with my hands because the camera, I'm in a hotel right now, and the camera is literally right next to my hand. So as you can see, throwing my hand up and down, yeah, my hand is right in your face. So I apologize for that. I need to bring myself back here a moment. I am currently in Emporia, Kansas. So I drove straight from Indiana yesterday. So it's currently April 30th, and tomorrow it's gonna be May. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to do it. You guys know what meme I'm talking about. I had to do it. Either way, I'm recording a couple episodes while I'm here. I'm going to be also teaching my 8-hour course, and I'm excited to do that. There's a lot of different things going on, whether it be courses that I'm teaching or conferences that are coming up, as well as the podcast. And I am on a strict deadline for book number 2 of Imagine Listening. So I've got until May 15th to get that done. I've just got a couple pieces left that I'm putting together, and then it'll be submitted, and it'll be done. It'll be done. That'll be book 2 in a series of books that are coming out for Imagine Listening. And those are the books that highlight these stories of the I Am 911 movement, these powerful stories that were submitted, and sharing what it is, just a glimpse of what it's like to take these phone calls. But these are from 911 professionals from all over the world. So August 4th, 2024 is when that book is going to launch. It's going to launch in Orlando, and that is going to be at the National APCO conference. So look out for all of that. And if you go to links, and that links with 2 eyes.co/WTT podcast, there's a button there where you can pre-order book number 2. You can also buy book number 1, and you can easily go to withinthetrenches.net to find all that information out as well. So again, a lot of different things going on. When this episode comes out, it will, honestly, it might be June because that's how many episodes I have that are waiting to go out. And all of these, though, amazing, powerful stories. And I am excited for my guest today. And we met a couple of weeks ago, actually, in the beginning of this month. And it was the week before National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. I was out in Johnston County, North Carolina. I was teaching out there. We were doing some live broadcasts and so many different things. It was excellent. Had a lot of fun out there. And my guest today is Jonathan, and he's a TC CTO with Johnston County out of North Carolina.
Hey, Ricardo. Hey, everybody. How are y'all doing?
What is going on, man?
Oh, just enjoying this nice North Carolina weather right now. It feels amazing outside, so I'm just enjoying it.
You know, I'll say this right off the bat. I'm a little jealous. And the reason I say that is because when I was there, it was a little bit cooler. It was still nice, right? It was a little bit cooler, though. There wasn't a lot of sun. It was a lot of overcast.
Yep.
And at one point, one of the nights, I think it was the night after the class, I ended up going out to a barbecue joint out there, and I'm looking straight out, and the wind was going like so bad that everything that people were saying in there, I started to freak out a little bit because I thought, oh man, I'm not in Kansas. However, something could happen because it looked pretty crazy out there. Like, no, you'll be all right. I said, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We're at that weird stage too, where in the mornings it's like kind of chilly where you need a jacket, but in the afternoons it's like 80 degrees. Like you don't know how to dress for the day. It's so crazy.
Oh, geez. And I thought the Midwest was had sort of, disorder where they didn't know what season it is. Oh, man. Well, it is awesome to have you here, man. And I am looking forward to learning more about you. So how did you get in public safety to begin with?
So my background has kind of always been in public safety with my family. My granddad worked for the Department of Corrections. I've got an uncle in the fire service that retired. My mom, she was in the records department for the police department in the city of Raleigh here. My dad, he's ran EMS, volunteered EMS, and then eventually he got into dispatch at Raleigh Wake 911, and that was in my younger years. So I kind of grew up around it. It was always a part of me and my family. When I was younger, I didn't want to get in public safety. I tried to stay away from it just to kind of go do something different, but here I am. So.
Oh, man. Okay. So what are some of the things that you remember growing up? Like, do you remember a lot of, radio traffic? Do you remember, seeing family members like hauling ass running to get to a call? Or what are some of those things?
So I don't really remember a lot from like the fire side and EMS side with my dad. I was
Mhm.
very young, so when he was running those calls, I was probably before 1, 2 years old. Um, the older that I got, I do remember my dad would have these training exercises that he would have to go to. And of course, me being the kid, I was always wanting to go. So he worked it out with his chiefs and things like that, where I could go to training with them and I would be the patient. And so it was kind of cool. The one thing that I remember the most about the training was we went to our local community college here. And back then, the rescue squad did all the technical rescue things and high angle rescues. And I remember dad asking me, "Hey, do you want to do training today with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." They didn't tell me what they were doing, and they were actually doing a high angle rescue. And I may have been 7 years old at the time. And they literally put me on the roof of this college and put me in the Stokes basket, rigged it up, lowered me down, and I was petrified. I had nightmares about that for years because I had no idea what was going to happen. But it was cool now thinking back on it. Like a lot of kids and a lot of people don't get that opportunity to do that kind of thing. So it's kind of cool as far as that. Then when my dad got into dispatch, those were the years that I really remember. My dad worked as a supervisor for Raleigh Wake. He retired with 20 plus years. My mom, she worked in the Raleigh the Police Department's record division. And basically what she did with them was she corrected accident reports, looked over the officers' reports. And she worked a lot of hours, even though her time there was 8 to 5. She would sometimes stay later or things like that, go in on the weekends. Well, me being a kid, I didn't want to sit there and watch my mom, push papers to the side and flip papers. So my dad's office and dispatch center was downstairs. And I'd ask, can I go down there and hang out with dad? And mom was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I would go down to the basement and, I would sit with dad, and he had some guys there on his shift that would let me sit with them, and I'd wear a headset and, listen in on phone calls and things like that. So I've always been around dispatch from probably 7, 8 years old until now. I'm 35 and I'm doing it myself. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, dude. Okay, let's back up a little bit. That's that's a lot of experience, especially right off the bat as a kid and everything growing up. So I can only imagine there was maybe a little bit of jealousy from friends that you
Oh yeah.
got to do a lot of this cool shit and stuff. But also, so I mean, I'm a firm believer that history repeats itself. So have you given like have you had the chance what I guess I don't know, do you have kids?
I have a stepdaughter. Yes.
Okay, so stepdaughter. All right, have you had the chance to be like, hey, do you want to come and do a training?
So it's funny. We haven't, she just turned 14 last week.
Mhm.
And from probably 2 or 3 years ago, she made her decision. She wants to go into the medical field. And that was not even with me talking with her or her mother talking with her. She just made that decision on her own. And so she's decided she wants to be a nurse of some sort, maybe pursue doctor later on down the road. But she made that decision on her own. She sees me in the public safety field. Her mother also works in public safety with sheriff's office dispatch with the county. So she's been around it growing up. So she understands everything that happens and everything like that. So
That's pretty awesome, man. That's
yeah.
cool that, she ended up making that decision and everything. Now, do you ever talk to your parents about some of those times growing up, especially taking part in that training when you're being lowered down?
Yeah. So I have, it's funny that we're talking about this because I just hit my 13th year in dispatch
Congratulations, man.
this past month. So for years, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't like going to school. I had taken some college classes outside of high school, but school wasn't for me.
Mhm.
And so for years, I worked at a golf course here. I love being outside, working outside. So I was like, I'll just stick with that and, maybe go to school later. Well, obviously working at a golf course, in the wintertime, there's no work. So you kind of have to find something to do in the winter. And so I got hired at a local Home Depot department store. I loved it there, worked there for many years. While I was there, I was also on a fire department as a part-time fireman. So I had gone and taken these fire classes and done that. Well, my director at the time that worked at the 911 center, I wasn't employed there yet, but he kept asking me, "Hey, come work for me, man. Come work for me. Come work for me." And I was like, "Dude, no, like, I'm not doing that. Like, I want to do something different." He knew my dad. That was the thing. A lot of people knew who my dad was because he was in the industry for so long. And I just kept saying no. I kept saying no. And I would go back and talk to my dad. And I'm like, "Hey, these people keep asking me to go work for them." And I was like, "But I don't want to do it. Like, I want to do something different. Like, I just want to do something different."
Yeah.
And full circle, March of 2012, he asked me again, "Hey, we're hiring. You want to come work for me?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm going to give it a shot." And here I am. So.
Oh, man. Repetitive persistence.
Yep.
Just like an EMD.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
They brought you into the fold. So
Yeah.
you have all of this, this experience. You have your whole family and everything. You're growing up in it, and you doing trainings and being in the center and everything. So you already kind of have the lay of the land. You're used to hearing some of that traffic and everything else. So when you finally decide, yes, that you're going to go and do this, and you said it was what month and year now again?
March of 2012.
March of 2012. So wow, that is crazy because I was already on my way out. I was
Yeah.
getting on my way out as you were starting and stuff. That's craziness. So then for you, when you end up deciding, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do this, I'm going to at least try it. You had already been in the center, right? I mean,
Right.
you've been there before and everything, but did you do like an extra sit along or anything like that? Or did you just go straight into like the hiring process?
I pretty much went straight into the hiring process.
Mhm.
So at that time, my dad wasn't working with the county. So he worked with the sheriff's office that I work with now many, many, many years before that,
Mhm.
before moving to Raleigh and dispatching there. But as far as Johnston County, um, I got hired, went through the hiring process and started. I had many questions. People asked me, "Why don't you go work at Raleigh? That's where your dad was at. He retired from there." And at the time, I didn't know if I was going to stick with it. I didn't know if I was going to really like it.
Yeah.
And Raleigh and Wake County compared to Johnston County is a big, big difference. They're a lot busier. There's a lot more field units. Johnston County, for me starting out, felt like a good place to start and get my feet wet and really just get into it to see if I really wanted to do it. And so when I got hired at Johnston, I went with it. I wanted to also get hired somewhere where I could make a name for myself. Even though people that worked with me or that I was working for knew who my dad was, I wanted to just go in with a fresh slate and just make a name for myself. And I feel like I've done that. I've been to many conferences and been invited. My staff and my directors have invited me to do things and go do things and kind of see what the outside industry is besides answering phone calls and things like that. The weird thing, I guess, is kind of another full circle is when I get hired at Johnston after my interview, they're like, if you want to go up to the floor, you can, introduce yourself to the staff working, kind of just sit and watch, things like that. And I had done that prior to my interviews just to kind of see if I really wanted to do that.
Mhm.
So I get up the ramp, and at our old building, which you didn't get a chance to see because we were in our nice big state of the art building. But
Right.
when you walked in our old building, there was a ramp. And at the top of that ramp, we had our motto, "Failure is not an option," at the top of the wall. And this lady turns her chair around and she's like, "Jonathan Davis?" And I was like, "Yeah." So me and her get to talking, and come to find out, she was at Raleigh Wake with my dad. My dad actually trained her, and she worked on my dad's shift for years before she left and came to Johnston County. And so of course she was like, "You got hired with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just accepted the offer. I'll start, in a couple weeks." And so when I start, she ends up training me. So my dad trained her and she trained me, which was very awesome to be a part of, because it was super cool hearing those stories that I didn't get to hear about my dad and his shift and how he worked. And then I got to hear all those things, when I got hired. So it was super cool to be a part of that.
Wow. So you end up going this other route to basically, set your own legacy and
Yep.
and do everything that you're doing, but you just happen to meet somebody there who
Yep. Yeah, it was wild. It was
that
wild, definitely.
that is a very cool full circle moment. And I just imagine how that was for her as well, to be able to go through that and be like,
Yeah.
man, your dad trained me and now I'm going to be training you.
Yep,
How crazy
it
is
was
that?
super cool.
That is very cool. Yes. So you end up going through, the training and all of this. You have this amazing moment, and did you already know that, like, kind of right away, that you were where you were supposed to be, or did it take a little while in going through training, taking phone calls, or did you just kind of feel it right off the bat?
I felt it kind of off the bat. I've had a fire and EMS background. My family's had a fire and EMS background. I had no law enforcement background at all. So
Yeah.
in training, I really struggled with the law enforcement side of training. I just, if I could just have done fire and EMS, I would have loved it right out the gate. And I did love it right out the gate. It was something new dealing with the law enforcement side of things. Um, but once I started, getting the hang of law enforcement and how they communicate and, things like that, it was like a light bulb. The light bulb had been off throughout my whole law enforcement training. I'd have days where I could get it. Then I had some days I'd go in and I couldn't do anything right. Um, a lot of that had also to do with me personally outside of dispatch, because I got hired at Johnston part-time.
Mhm.
So with that being said, it was possible they weren't going to keep me. It was possible, it was unknown hours of when I was going to work. So obviously I had to make a living. And so I kept my job at Home Depot. And I was basically like working both jobs at the same time, while also in the fire service, running medical fire calls late at night, volunteer and things like that. I was lucky and fortunate enough that my manager at Home Depot, I told them that I'd got a new job, but it was part-time, and that if they could work around my schedule. So basically what I would do is I would work dispatch. I would get hired and I would go in. My training was on day shift, so it was from 6A to 6P. We'd work the modified DuPont schedule. So I would work 2, off 2, work 3, off every other weekend. But there was days where I would leave dispatch and I would have to go to Home Depot because they scheduled me to go to work. So I would work, 6 to 11 at night, turn around and go to dispatch the next day. But at the time I had to do that because I didn't know if I was going to be hired full time at Johnston. So I had a really awesome supervisor at the time. He saw some days that I struggled, and there was a couple in there. I remember him specifically pulling me to the side, and He's like, I understand what's going on. If you need some time off, you just need to let me know. And of course, me being, the high mighty dog I am, I was like, no, man, I'm good. Like I'm good. But he saw that I was not good. So he let me off, and he told me, he's like, I want you to go home, rest, don't work anywhere, don't do anything. And that was on, like, I think a Wednesday or Thursday. So I was off from dispatch that weekend. And so when he did that, it was really a lifesaver for me and probably my career, in honesty, because I was just so drained. And it was fortunate pretty much the next week, the directors called me in and offered me a full-time position. And so I turned in my resignation at Home Depot, and it all started from there. So.
So I have to say right off the bat, I mean, there's a few things, but I'm going to start with this one. It is very refreshing and very cool to hear that you had that type of support, because in some places they might see it, but they let people drown, and basically a version of eating our young, which sucks. And I'm glad that person saw that and was like, you go and rest and don't work anywhere else, kind of be with you, feel, go through the motions and everything, and then come back. And then also to end up having that full-time position come in as well, or get brought in full-time rather, that's even better, because I mean, I can only imagine you came back even stronger and wanting to do what you were doing and stuff, which is awesome. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask was, did you at any time answer the phone at Home Depot with 111 or anything like that? I ask because when I was first starting at the last center that I was at, Allegan Central Dispatch, I was working part-time as well. I was training and I was doing private 911 for a different company, for an actual company. And and I answered a few times Allegan Central, this is Ricardo. And then there was one time it was Allegan 911. And people are like, where am I calling? I'm like, oh my God, I'm not in 911 right now. Like, that's how messed up I was. So I'm just curious, like, did you ever have any of those moments?
No, not really. I'm sure I did, a couple times, but the good thing about my job was at Home Depot was I really didn't have to do a lot of phones.
Well, that's good.
I did more of stocking shelves, helping the customers, get their items in the garden center or lumber department, things like that. So as far as the phones go, I really didn't have to answer too many, because there's not a lot of people that call into Home Depot. And if they
That's
do,
true.
if they do call, they call to talk to customer service or a manager, things like that. They don't call to talk to a specific department. So I got lucky with that, because if I'd have been working at the customer service desk, I'm sure I would have done it every day, multiple times a day.
Oh, yeah. So like for me, let's see, because you said you're in your 30s, so I'm going to be 43 in a few weeks. And for me, when I was working at this retail store, it's called Meijer. It's basically the same thing as a Walmart, and I worked in a like home goods type department. And because there wasn't, smartphones and apps and everything else that you can easily just find everything on there, which I think kind of cuts down a lot of that customer service calls as well, going into a place like Home Depot or Lowe's or whichever. I would have people call all the time. They're like, what do you have any lava lamps? I'm like, what? Like, what are you calling for? So there would be moments like that where I would have to talk to people on the phone. So that's why I was wondering if any of that, happened with you and stuff. Now, I do have to ask though, and if you don't mind me asking, what do you feel were some of the things that that you struggled with when it came to law enforcement? And the reason I asked that as well is because, like, for myself, when I had switched from a single seat PD dispatch on for 8 hours by myself to central dispatch, where there was 3 to 4 of us on at a time, because there was a lot more traffic alone, but also when I'm on law enforcement, like main radios, like I wanted to do a good job, like such a good job that when I was with my trainer, even if a response was just a simple 10-4, I would quickly look at her and I would say, "It's just 10-4, right? There's nothing else I have to
Yep.
say." And you're like, "Yeah, that's it." I'm
Yep.
like, "Okay, I just want to make sure." What do
Yep.
you think it was for you?
I think it was a lot of that as well. At our agency, Fire and EMS gets every detail of the call. Um, our law enforcement officers, obviously, when you key up to talk on the radio, it needs to be short, sweet, to the point, because there's another officer that may be trying to transmit traffic in. So for me, that was the big thing. Like, had that fire and EMS background, and I'm wanting to give out every information that I can. But at the same time, they were like, "You need to hurry up. You need to hurry up." And I'm like, "Well, I need to tell them this." And they were like, "Is it important? Is it scene safety? Is it something that's going to change the outcome of this call?" And I was like, "Yeah, but we do that over there at Fire and EMS." And they're like, "Yeah, but while you're transmitting on law enforcement, there might be an officer that needs to get out emergency traffic on his radio. So you need to, focus on that."
Right.
So that was a big thing for me. Also, 10 codes, you know, oh my gosh. So when we get hired, we get a training book and a notebook. My notebook was nothing but 10 codes. I would write down 10 codes over and over and over again. I could not get 10 codes to save my life. And that's only, I think, because in Fire and EMS, we use plain text. I had been in the fire service. I got in the fire service in 2008, right out of high school. So I had, 4 or 5 years where I was in the fire service. Then I get hired at dispatch. And so I'm so used to just hearing plain text besides 10-4. So man, those 10 codes, they about broke me. Like, I'm not even going to lie. And so, like, I remember at my breaking point, my supervisor at the time, he'd say, "Let's go have a meeting." And we would go outside, and, he would talk with me. And we're at our old building, his office, he liked to call it, was our smoking area. He smoked at the time. I smoked at the time. So he was like, "Let's go to my office." And we would go outside, and it was just a relaxed conversation. Basically him being positive, nothing. Obviously, if I had made a big mistake, we would talk about that, but it was more of a positive conversation. He would pump me up, "Hey, you can do this. You've got this. It's not as hard as you're thinking it is." And I remember there was so many times I would go out there and smoke with him, and I wanted to punch the wall so many times because I was frustrated with myself because I couldn't get it. I
Right.
knew I could do it. I just couldn't get it. And a few months go by, and I was at the tail end of my training on law enforcement. And matter of fact, it was pretty much my final sign off before I was completely released. And I was sitting at one of our local police channels, and one of the officers calls out a 1043, which in Johnston County is a chase. And I remember when he called that out, I remember pushing my chair back and standing up and looking over my console at my supervisor like, "Hey, are you going to do this?" And he looks at me and he's like, "Well, are you going to answer the radio?" And I was like, "Yeah." I did it, and it was like a light bulb. My light bulb kicked on, and that's when I knew that I really could do this, because they're calling out, different intersections. They're calling out other 10 codes, a 1095 being a weapon. He thought he saw a weapon, things like that. So when all that happened, that's when I knew, hey, I'm here for the long haul. I can do this.
That is amazing right there. And that's why I was asking as well, because there's a lot of folks that I've spoken to where it's either right when they get in there, or it's, some sort of incident or call or something
Yep.
over the radio that they end up involved in, where it's
Yep.
just like you said, it's that light bulb moment. It just, everything clicks and you're just going to it. Because for those who are watching and listening who have never done any of this before, when you're on law enforcement radio and someone says, either throws out a 10 code like that, or like for us, they would just sometimes simply just yell it out, "I got one running."
Yep.
And we would, we're like, what's the location, and you're going through everything and you're repeating everything that the person is saying. And for us, what we would do is, we would quickly key up and say, Central's under code 7 until so and so releases it. Everybody else, other traffic, go to like secondary or something, and that main traffic stays there. So you're repeating everything that the person is saying, where they're running, the suspect description, or cross streets or whichever, and
Right.
that gets intense.
And another thing too, I don't know what it is. Obviously every day in 911, you answer the same kind of calls, the same type of calls, but every call is different.
Mhm.
It's uh, it's like a roller coaster in an amusement park. Everything's up and down, everything's fast, and then there's some rides that are slow. That's how dispatch is. We have our moments where we're slam busy going 110 miles an hour, and then we have some where we're just coasting at 25 and cruise control.
Yeah.
But when it gets to that 100 miles an hour, it's like the best adrenaline rush ever. I'm not a roller coaster fan, but I can only imagine what a roller coaster would be like, especially compared to dispatch, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think I might have said this in class, but sometimes those phone calls, especially when you're very first, like those very first phone calls, waiting for something to come in is like that suspense, that anticipation of the tick 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 when you're on a roller coaster and you're waiting to go up, and you're like, oh my god, I don't know what this is going to feel like. I don't know. You've got that built, and then just whoosh, and then that's that call that's coming in. You're like, oh my god.
Yep, that's right. And that's pretty much how it is. And I think that's why I've really loved doing dispatch, because it's something different every day. We don't do the same thing every day. We don't take the same calls every day. We don't talk to some of the same. Well, we talk to some same people every day, but
That's true.
for the most part, for the most part, every day that we come in and we sign in and we go to work, it is something different every minute, every second of every day. So you will never get bored, really, because you don't know when that phone rings. You don't know what type of call is going to come in. The radio traffic, same thing. You don't know what's going to happen over on the other side of that radio. And I think that's what has really stuck with me the most is, I've been in it now for 13 years. I'm at that point where some days I'm really burnt out. Some months I'm really burnt out. I rethink things. I'm like, do I really want to stay with this? Do I really want to do this? But then I try to think back of when I first started and what my feelings were when I first started. And it kind of brings me back to more solid ground, and I can basically kind of start over again. Because this job is very hard. It's very tough mentally. Sometimes it's physically hard. But the mental side of it is very, very hard. And, I've watched your podcast for many years. I've met you at a conference years ago. And what you're doing now is very, very important to not just myself, but for people just getting in dispatch, or even people that's been in it for 30 years, because a lot of people, and myself included, I've done it. I'm that top dog. If you ask me if I'm okay, I'm going to tell you I'm okay. But behind closed doors, I'm not okay. And I'll kind of touch base on that in a little while, I'm sure, on some things that's happened with me. But it's just one of those things where, you got to remember why you got in this profession, how it was your first day, and go from there.
Well, I appreciate that, man, very much. Thank you. It's been a great experience. There's so much stuff that has happened, and like I've mentioned before, all of this started from my own struggle. And if what I do could help those who are coming in, who have been there, help them talk or get their stories out, to not have to deal with certain things like I did during that time, then damn it, I'm going to do it. because I want people to be able to feel comfortable, not only talking about what they do, but also, kind of getting those stories out that they've held in, and also to make people
Yep.
think, to make them think about what it was like in the beginning, because you're right. A lot of times we forget, and then when other people are coming in, you're like, why aren't they getting this, or why this, or
Yep.
why that, and then you take a moment to think back, and you think, oh, I was there too. I had the same. Okay, let's switch the mindset around, and let's help this person because they want to be here, and we want to keep them, and kind of protect them in a way, right? So that
Yep.
they have it, basically, to leave 911 in a better place than what we found it, and continue that good legacy as well that is going on. So, I think what is also cool is you had a lot of those experiences growing up, but you had your family as well. So
Right.
here's a question for you. Even, like when you were first starting out in the beginning with dispatching, and you're trying to figure out, whether it be the 10 codes or any other part of law enforcement, or those pieces, did you ever get a chance to kind of talk to your parents and kind of throw some ideas around, or have them kind of help you more? Where I can only imagine, growing up, there were a lot of things that they didn't tell you, kind of like how you mentioned when the girl who was training you, who was trained by your dad, you probably heard
Yep.
some stuff that you were like, I never knew that. I'd never heard about that. So, now that you're older, that you're in the thick of it, you can kind of have maybe some of those deeper conversations with them.
Yep. And so, like my dad, when he worked with his big city, they by the time I really got down there to really visit, he was off the floor kind of. He was a
Mhm.
supervisor, and their supervisors kind of sat back and observed and oversaw their shifts. So I would get to sit with other people on his shift that were seasoned employees.
Mhm.
And that was the thing, I did later on in life once I got started good, obviously in training, my dad would ask how things are going. And I would tell him, I love it. It's just hard. The law enforcement side of things is very hard. And, you know, I struggled in school. I'm not going to lie. I didn't apply myself very well. But when I got hired in dispatch, that's one thing that I did. I would apply myself. I would come home after every shift and I would study for hours at a time. And it hasn't stopped. I've continued to take classes. I've continued to learn and train and do new things. This past year, um, I recently got the CTO through APCO. So now I'm certified CTO, which was a hard course, but at the same time, I applied myself. And I just get it. I get dispatch. When I got in the fire service, I didn't apply myself very well, but I tried to, but I just couldn't get it. I couldn't
Mhm.
get the fire service. But for some reason, this dispatch clicks. Me and dispatch are like a married couple. We click. And so it's all pretty much come easy for me once I got the law enforcement lingo down and things like that. Once I got that, it's been smooth sailing ever since.
That is awesome, and I love that. You kind of mentioned what it was like in school, because I myself, um, so for me specifically, my parents, they were going through a divorce my senior year, and I just threw everything out of what I was doing. Didn't care about school anymore, and I was just letting it fall to the wayside. And
Yep.
when I was getting close to graduation, I started thinking, I was like, I'm gonna have to repeat this. Like, I'm this not gonna happen, because if I don't do this now, it's not gonna happen. So I ended up going to night classes, and I ended up getting everything, and I graduated. But when I graduated, like my GPA, like none of it was as good as it would have been had I too, like, had I applied myself or anything. So
Yep.
from that time on, when I went back to school, and when I was in dispatch and I was doing all that stuff, I kept that in my head. Like, I don't want to repeat what I did then, and I want to keep pushing forward and keep pushing forward. And so I can relate to you there. on wanting to just be better, right, in general,
Yep.
and continue doing stuff. And this as well, you're cementing your own legacy. This is
Mhm.
your story, and you are putting everything into it to make that story the best that it can be, so that you can leave that legacy. And man, I love that. That is awesome.
Yeah, and like I love training new employees. I've trained probably 10 or 11 employees since my senior TC years. So when I first got hired, obviously I was learning the ropes, things like that. At the 3-year mark, we can basically apply for senior telecommunicator. So I applied for it, we got it, things like that. And from that point on, I felt like I needed to train people. I had a good trainer, great trainer, and when I train people, I don't give them just the basics of what they need to know. I don't give them what's in their book. We will learn that book and we will learn the policies and procedures, but I'm going to give you my experiences and I'm going to give you every ounce of everything that I have for this job, because the way I train you and you work is a reflection of me. And so
Very well put.
I
Yes.
really, I really do that. When I put 100% into training new employees. When I get a trainee, we do things on our days off. I had a trainee a couple years ago that moved from another county, and so he struggled with geography, landmarks. Just he wasn't familiar with the county, and obviously looking at a map on CAD, you know, he was learning it, things like that, but he just couldn't get it. So on our day off, he met at my house and we rode around all day. I took him back roads. I showed him what road led into this road, and just we made a whole 8-hour, 9-hour day out of it. And we got through that portion of it. And then a couple weeks later, he's like, "Hey man, let's ride to this side of the county." And I was like, "Okay." So he met me again and we did that other side of the county. And so once he did that, he started getting it and everything started to fall into place. And that's a reflection of me going above and beyond. I didn't have to do that on my day off, but he asked me to. So I felt like I needed to. That was just a part of me.
That is what makes a good trainer, and also what makes people want to stay.
Yep.
And I love that, because there's not a lot of places that have that. There's not a lot of places that have
Yep.
trainers that go above and beyond, like you were doing there. And I can
Yep.
see where that person would start to get it as well, because and it's not a people pleasing type thing. It's because you made it fun and
Yep.
interesting, and they felt like they were being seen and heard, and it started to click, and they started to
Yep.
learn. They're going to remember that, man. And they're, who knows, they might end up becoming a trainer as well, and maybe
Mhm.
doing the same thing for someone else, to go on those geography rides and learn more and more and more. And that's that that's that cycle that you don't want to break. That, because a lot of times there's bad shit that's going on, right? Whether it be with
Yep.
trainers, this is not just in dispatch, this is in any profession, and you want to break
Oh
those
yeah.
cycles. But this type of cycle, this is the type that you want to continue going, so that those next generation of 911 that comes in, they're going to
Yep.
have that same type of awesomeness to learn and continue
Yep.
doing what they're doing.
Exactly. Yep. And I feel like the employees that I've trained, if at some point they start their training journey of training new employees, I know where they came from. They are a reflection of me. I know how they got trained, and I know that they have took some things with them to help them train new people as well. So it's a good feeling. It's definitely a good feeling knowing that they have, I've set the footsteps for them to train people and how they should be trained.
Right. Yes. Now, so I've got a couple questions here, and so the first one, We've been talking about so many different things, and it's been awesome having you on here to talk about everything and learning more about you and everything. But so if we go back really quick to the beginning, now you mentioned, one of those calls that was on the radio, but what about the phone calls? When you first started taking phone calls, do you remember any of those first ones, or even more so, how did you feel when now it's your turn and you're
Yeah.
taking calls now?
Yeah. So my first day, I observed for like the first 2 hours. We went on break. We come back. When we come back, my trainer was like, "Okay, your turn. Log in." And I remember logging in to my phone, logging into my CAD, logging into everything. And I remember being so nervous, and I don't know why, because at that point, I had been, obviously I know how to talk on the phone. I know how to talk to people, but it was just like the surprise. You don't know what's going to happen. And I
Right.
remember, I remember the first time that I picked it up, there was nobody there. And I was like, huh, this is weird. But it was just a 911 hang up call. I called the lady back, and, she was like, everything's fine. It was in my pocket. And I was like, okay, great. Like, I took that big, deep breath, like, okay, great. And it was like that for me for a while. I don't know why. It was like every time I would pick up the phone, it was like a hang up call. And I was like, all right, this is great. I don't remember really my first like actual call. I
Yeah.
wish I could, because I remember more hang up calls than anything. I don't remember like the first true emergency that somebody called in for. But it was funny there at the beginning, because everybody's like, you just need to answer the phone all the time, because everything's a hang up call when you pick it up. And I was like, yeah, I guess so.
It was a bunch of gotcha moments.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the dispatch universe playing around with you, like, oh, we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
wait. Just hold on, it's coming,
Yeah.
it's coming.
Yeah.
Uh,
But later on in my career, several years later, I think it was I think it might have been a year later, actually, close to a year. I answered a call, and it was a first party house fire. He was trapped upstairs in his duplex apartment area. And I remember staying on the line with him. We went through PDIs and everything, and pre-arrival instructions of trying to find out where he was in his house, because on this phone call, he was upstairs. He was saying that his bottom floor was on fire, and it was going up the stairwell to where he was at. And I just remember having to switch hats, because remember, I'm still in the fire service.
yeah.
I had to remember, I can't do this. I can't say this. Like, I've got to stick with this protocol. And the odd thing about this call that I remember the most was about 15 minutes prior to that call, I had done a test call with the exact same scenario, first party trapped in a house fire. And 15 minutes later, it happens. If I hadn't have done that test call, it wouldn't have gone as smooth. I know for a fact. But since I had familiarized myself with that, I knew what I was doing, and that kind of thing. So it definitely helped me. And I remember staying on the line. I remember hearing the fire department call out to him, and him calling back, and they ended up getting him. And once they got to him, I disconnected, obviously. And about a month later, the fire department invited me to their town hall meeting. I got a life save pin with the fire department, things like that. So that was pretty cool, being a part of that.
That's pretty awesome, because a lot of people, they don't get that chance. But how crazy that you were practicing this. Basically, you put it out there in the universe, and then it happens. And so as I said in the class when I was there with everyone, I'm a firm believer that there are some phone calls that are meant for us to take.
Yep.
And I mean, you don't get any more clear than that moment where this was definitely meant for you. I mean, you had already taken or you had already done the testing for it, but plus your background and everything else. I mean, you've got everything there. where it's not to say that none of your partners wouldn't do a good job. They would probably do a great
Right.
job. They didn't have that type of experience that you do, and they probably didn't do the testing like you had
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
before that either.
It was very odd. Like how it all played out was very, very odd. And then after it was over, my supervisor was joking with me, and he was like, "Don't ever put in a test call like that ever again." And I was like, "Okay." So obviously he's telling me not to put in plane crashes and things like that. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
"Okay, I won't do none of that." But yeah, it was very awesome. That's one of the good calls that I try to remember.
Yeah.
Because there's so many bad ones that stuck with me. So that one's pretty cool.
And now I kind of wish I would have asked you before before this one here, but I was going to ask, and of course, if you feel comfortable talking about this as we're going kind of into the wrap up of the episode as well, is kind of a call that sticks with you. And it can be a save as well, but again, if you feel comfortable, a call that sticks with you as well.
Yeah. So this one's gonna be tough. It was probably in 13, I guess. So we have a thing in our county called Mule Days.
Mhm.
It's a big event in the town of Benson. It happens every year. They do parades, they have rodeos, they have street dances, you name it. It's a very, very big event. People come from all over the country to come to this event. And so our department and our staff, we always get overtime. They always get people because there's officers from all over the county that come in and work just this event. So it's a very big event. And so we get a couple of people to come in and work overtime. And I volunteered to work. I was young. I was wanting to make the money. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I was on night shift at the time. So it was volunteered night shift. Me and my supervisor, who's been with me pretty much from day one, the greatest supervisor I think I've ever had. He also volunteered to work. And so me and him have always had a close bond together. We went in, he's like, "Hey, we get to pick where we want to sit. Where do you want to sit?" It's like the Super Bowl night, let's make it happen. So me and him volunteered to sit fire and EMS console. We both have a fire and EMS background. So I said, I can rock this console. Like, this is going to be fun. He sat at fire. I sat at EMS. We logged in. First couple of hours, or actually the first couple of minutes, I should say, same thing, typical shift change, hang up calls, things like that. We do shift change at 5:45. At 6:30, I pick up the phone, and it's nothing but screaming. It's a female screaming, can't understand anything she's saying, literally at all. And so my my partner sitting at fire, my supervisor, he rolls his chair over to me. He takes off his headset, or my headset, picks up my radio channels and says, "You focus on this caller." We get a phase in location. We do everything. We doing everything we can because I can't understand an address. Once I finally get her to calm down enough to understand her, she has found her 13-year-old daughter hanging in a closet. And I just remember. Sorry, Ricardo.
No. You're okay, man. You're okay.
I just remember feeling helpless, and it wasn't because I didn't know. I felt helpless because I couldn't understand what this mom was saying. She was screaming, and but thank God for technology. Because if we had to have a phase in location, I would have not known where she was at. I would not have. I wouldn't have been able to help her at all. So thank God for the technology side of things for that call. But I did finally get her to kind of calm down enough that I could talk with her. And then it was obviously too late. She had been there for several hours. The crazy thing about this call, though, to me, is she starts to tell me like a history, or not history, but current events through that day. She was a nurse. The mom was a nurse at one of the local hospitals on the next town or next city over. Her daughter was in school, and called her mom saying that she was sick and that she needed to come home. She said, okay. Her daughter went home. Her mom ended up getting off work several hours later. And between the time her mom got off the phone with her saying she was coming home from school to the time she got off work, she had talked to her at some point before that. And her daughter said, I'm feeling better. I need to go next door to my classmate's house and finish a project that we have to do. We don't have long to do it, so I just need to help them. So her mom gets home from work thinking that her daughter is at a friend's house next door finishing a project for school. Her mom's doing laundry, and ends up finding her when she's hanging up her daughter's laundry in the closet. And that was, like I said, that was several hours later. I don't know a time frame of when it actually happened. If she'd have found her right when she got home, I don't know. But it was very tough. And I remember talking with different fire personnel and EMS personnel, and I obviously went to their debriefing that we had for that incident, because it really shook that community a lot. And I remember talking with some of the personnel that was on scene, and they were like, you did everything you could. She was beyond any help. Nothing would have changed that. And so some of the other people talked with me, and they were like, I want to know why. Why did she do it? Obviously the sheriff's office went out there and detectives went out, and she did it because of bullying. She was being bullied at school for who she was dating at the time. The person she was dating or going out with was a different race of what she was. And a lot of people in school were bullying her. So after she called her mom, telling her mom that she was going to work on this project, she went outside. She put her phone in the bird bath with water, thinking it would destroy the phone, and then went inside and completed it. I guess you can call it. Detectives found her phone, went through it, found all the text messages and things like that. But you said it earlier. There's some calls that's meant for you, and that was one, because I volunteered to work. I volunteered to work that shift, and I volunteered to sit at that fire and EMS console, and I feel like that's the one that I was supposed to get to, and I try to remember that. And it doesn't help all the time. It helps some, but that one was one that I was supposed to have. And come to find out, a good outcome on it was that particular night was when I met my wife. The night I took that call, after it was over with, my partner sent me outside. He said, go take a break. I don't care how long you take, you just take a break. And you obviously know, he asked, do you need to go home? No, I don't need to go home. I've got a shift I've got to finish. Mm-hmm. I went outside for, I don't know, it felt like an hour, probably longer. Sat on the steps. He come out, checked on me. And a lady that works at the sheriff's office came out and checked on me. Come to find out, she would be my wife today. As a matter of fact, today's our anniversary. So she helped me a lot through that call, and still does. So.
Wow. Thank you for
sharing that, with all of us. And yeah, I after hearing everything that you I love that also everyone who is there did tell you that there's nothing else you could do, because there's
Yeah.
nothing more powerful than that gift of closure, where
Yeah.
there's nothing left to question, there's nothing left to chance, even though obviously it wasn't the best outcome and not the outcome that you would ever want, right?
Yeah.
But you were there with that
Yeah.
parent, you were there with them that whole time, and then to end up, I mean, who would you have ever expected to end up meeting your wife
No.
there?
No, not at all. Not in that moment. So it was funny that it happened. That it happened that way, because obviously everybody's, we check on our employees after calls and things like that. But for somebody to support you like that after that call, it's very awesome. Even your staff or your coworkers or my wife.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously, we weren't dating at the time. We barely knew each other. But that call kind of led us talking more and doing that kind of thing. But I will say this, this call, even though it has so many negative effects on me, myself, staff, if they take it, whatever. About a month later, after my debriefing, so I was at a local fire department. And it just so happened to be the fire department that responded. And we were doing a training exercise, and I got there early, and I got there early enough. I knew the chief, so me and him talked, and I got there just kind of catch up with the guys like we normally do. As I pull in, I see a car in the parking lot. I got there before everybody else. And as I walk in the Bay Area where the trucks are at, there was a female talking with the fire chief. And it just so happened to be the mom of the daughter that did this. Um, I had come from work, so I had on my 911 shirt, things like that, insignia on it. And I remember stopping. I had no idea who this lady was. I came in on the end of the conversation.
Mhm.
And what she was wanting to do was she was trying to donate her house to the fire department to do a training exercise because she didn't want to live there anymore. She was just, like any parent would be. So I remember standing there kind of off to the distance. She turned around to get ready to leave. And as she's leaving or turning around, she sees me. She notices my shirt, and she does like everybody, they see a shirt. Hey, do you work for them? And so she came up and she asked me, hey, do you work for Johnston County 911? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, well, can you do me a favor? And I said, well, yeah, sure. And she said, when you go back to work, I want you to look up a call. And she gives me the address, and I immediately recognized, obviously, the address. She tells me her name. I immediately recognize her name. And she says, can you go to this employee and thank him for everything that he did or he tried to do? Obviously, I wasn't very easy to, communicate with, but I just want to say thank you, and I'm sorry. And I kind of let her talk. I didn't want to just interrupt her and say, hey, it was me.
Right.
But after it was done, I said, well, I don't have to look up that call. I said, because I'm the one that you talked to. I'm the one that took the call. And of course, she immediately broke down into tears, because you don't run into that kind of thing every day. You don't meet the callers every day. And you definitely don't meet the dispatcher that took your call every day. And so that right there was, me and her talked for quite a while. And after that, that's kind of helped a little bit, but it's still, that was probably in 2013 or 2014. And that is by far the toughest call I will ever take, I hope. Just because obviously it's dealing with a child and things like that. But I've taken pediatric calls before, and I've taken pediatric codes, and I've taken dog bites and maulings for child, but for some reason that one just sticks. And I think it's because of the reaction the mother was having. I wasn't a father at the time. I didn't have kids. Now I do. And so, it's one of those things. I was meant to take that call, and I'll always feel that way. It's been tough. It was tough on me after that. I lost sleep. I would go to sleep. I would wake up with nightmares. I would be hearing her screaming. I couldn't explain it to people when I took off work. Like, I'm just taking off work for a mental day. But I can't explain it to you because I don't know how to explain it to you. But for a long time, it was nothing but nightmares and what could I have done different and things like that. And so I've come a long way, but it's still going to be one that sticks with me for the rest of my career and rest of my life. If I decide to go do something else, it's still going to stick with me.
Wow. That very powerful. And I can see why that would stick with you as well. And still, as you were saying, as we've been talking, it was definitely meant for you. I mean, what are the odds that you go, for the rest of what was going to be going on, and you see the mom there, and you just happen to talk. And
Yeah.
I feel like, as you said, it's always going to be there, right? But the more that you talk about it, the more you get it out, and the easier it is to kind of face it, right? And to
Yep.
heal and to get even more closure. And I can just imagine how much closure and healing it was, not just for you, but also for mom, as the both
Yeah.
of you are there talking during that
Yep.
time.
Definitely. And it kind of hits a little different because my daughter, she just turned 14.
Mhm.
So she was the exact same age or close to that age when I took that call. So I see the bullying in school now and what happens, because obviously I have a daughter and she's going to tell us everything about it. This is the drama that happened at school today. And we try to tell her the positive that she needs to be, because of the negative that is not just in her school, but in general, in life, in the world. There's so much negativity in this world. We talked before the podcast about the Charlotte incident. And stuff like that doesn't need to happen, but we can't control that.
Right.
But there's just so much negativity in this world. And just, one person needs to try to spread the positivity. And hopefully it'll just keep spreading. And so that's what we try to do with our daughter in school and her friends. And when they come over, we try to be that positive impact on their lives, because you don't know what somebody is dealing with on the inside or what they're dealing with at home. And, we always tell her and her friends that our house is always open to anybody. No matter the troubles, the problems, whatever. That's just how we are and how we try to be for everybody. So getting it out there, that's the big thing for me. This job is very tough. When I first started, I was happy-go-lucky all the time. I was a jokester. Now I'm not. I joke around some, but it's like very, very seldom. I'm trying to get back to this job. Obviously you have anxiety, you have depression, you have patience, very little patience. And I try my best to not have those things when I'm at home.
Yeah.
But you just can't help it. It sticks with you. So I've relied on my faith, to keep me strong, and my family, my friends. We've tried to get friends outside of public safety, but it's very hard because everybody that we know is in public safety.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we do have somewhat of a, I guess, friendship rule that when we're together, we're not talking public safety. We're going to talk football, hockey, sports, whatever. And so that's definitely helped. Now, it may end up turning into a work conversation for a little while, like every conversation does, but we try to just stay away from that. And on my bad days, I try to remember those good calls. You know, I've had several good calls, child deliveries, saves, you know, you name it, I've had it. But it's hard to remember those good calls whenever you've been in it long enough and you've had more negative than positive.
That's true. I can definitely see that. But I will say as well, from the time that I hung out with you and your crew, it's a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
Also to have Team Rescue Rangers there.
Yeah, that's right.
All of you mesh together so well, and
Yep.
those are those good moments as well, you know, to hang on to, even though a lot of that is at work. But
Yep.
When I was getting ready to leave the day of the class, we were all outside and we were talking in the parking lot, and that was a lot of fun. And I can
Yeah.
see how much fun it would be working with you and the rest of the
Yeah.
crew and all of that. And I love that it also had there was like a family feeling when I walked in
Yep.
there. You know, the
Yep.
hospital, like everyone had, you know, everything that they were doing, of course, right? But it just had that feeling when you walk in, like it had that vibe. And I
Yep.
love that you are in an environment like that, and also that there were a lot of folks that are willing to help, that are willing to share, and that are willing to support. Because again, there's a lot of places that don't have that. And I know for sure that anyone listening to this episode right now is going to gain a lot from your specific story. So thank you, man, for
Amen.
everything that you do, for being on, for sharing your story. And I've got one last question for you as we go into the wrap up of this episode, and that's, with all of the knowledge that you have, and this was a question that I gave all of you as well, if you could go back in time with all the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself at the beginning of your dispatching career, what is some advice you would give yourself? Not to change anything, but just to simply tell yourself.
Just remember that these callers, they're not mad at you. They're not yelling and they're cussing at you. They're calling on their worst day. And as funny as it sounds, I tell myself this all the time. It's their emergency. It's not mine. And to you as a call taker or dispatcher, it may not sound like an emergency, but to them it is. And so I try to remember that every day, because obviously we don't talk to these people on their best days. And so I try to remember that. And so I try to tell new people the same thing. Remember, they're not being disrespectful really to you. It's because of what's going on in their life and where they're at right now, calling, and why they're having to call you. The other thing I would say is to let it out, to talk, and don't talk. Don't let it out, like, or don't wait. Don't say, okay, I'll handle this bad day tomorrow. No, talk about it now, because I was not like that. I held it in for a while before I started talking about my worst days in dispatch. And now that I've started talking about those worst days in dispatch, it's helped me recover, to become better and become the more joking, the more outgoing person that I was in 2012 when I got hired. So don't hold it in, let it out, talk with whoever you need to talk to. I mean, I'll be more than happy. You can have my number. You can call me. I don't care. But definitely hold on to those good calls. Write them down. You know, we talked in class, Ricardo, about journaling, things like that. I haven't ever done that, but it's a great idea, especially if you can write down those good calls, because on those bad days, you can open that and read those good calls, and it'll help you recover from those bad ones.
Awesome, man. Holy hell. This was a great episode, man. And I appreciate you and your entire crew, everything that we all did out there. It was an experience. It wasn't just a training, man. It was an experience. Like, we all learned from each other, and there's so many people who are going to learn from you, from your story. So thank you again for being on. It's been an honor, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, man. You're always welcome in Johnston. Next time you come, we'll take you out to dinner or something, and I will not put you in the jail for those 3 meals that they offered you. Okay? I will not do that. We'll take you out to a nice restaurant or something.
I'm all about that. The sheriff caught me off guard when he said that, and we were live. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, that was hilarious, man. Well, thank you again very much, and I look forward to heading back out there. I'll be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments or questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on social media. And the easiest way to do all of this is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything on there. You'll find you'll find the email, social media. You'll be able to listen to the latest episode, and you can order Imagine Listening, the book. You can pre-order book number 2. There are many different options on there for a lot of different stuff. Simply go to links.co/WTT podcast, and I would love to have you on the show as well. There's a link on there for you to be able to schedule one. This broadcast has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader Next Gen Core Services, and a big shout out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you on Patreon, Circle, or Facebook. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn and X, and then you can listen 24/7 to the podcast on Apple Pod. There's a bunch of them that I have to always remember. On Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one.
You just listened to a Code 7 Network podcast. If you have any questions or would like to be a guest on the show, send an email to wttpodcast@gmail.com.
Imagine listening. That's something I ask you to do on a regular basis. Not just hear, but listen, understand, appreciate. Now imagine that I'm the one listening, but I can't understand. No matter how hard you try, how much you raise your volume, or use different words, I just won't get the message. That's what it's like for non-English speaking callers when they reach 911 in the United States. But it doesn't have to be. Translate audio and text instantly using Prepared Assist and let your caller be understood. Visit prepared911.com/translation to see how you can make language barriers crumble.